Hi, I'm Bradley Bell with the Upstream Collective and Antioch Church in Louisville, Kentucky. And today we're walking through Sending Church element number 4, building a strategy. Let me start with a definition. A sending church builds a strategy by taking its convictions, uniqueness, and focusing its strategy on specific models for missions and specific locations around the world. Rather than being spread thin, the sending church becomes invested in a specific strategy that guides the stewardship of financial resources in the sending efforts. That's a lot, so let's unpack it one part at a time. First and opening section, by taking its convictions, uniqueness, and focusing its strategy on specific models and specific locations. And so if you watch the video for Sending Church Element 3, we talked about vision there. And so vision is when you take who you want to be and you say, this is what we want to do, in a very concise statement. And it's compelling, it's exciting, you can get people behind it. But then it's like, wait a minute, how are we going to do this? And that is the question that strategy answers. Strategy is how you're going to fulfill your vision. And so we see this in Acts chapter 17. We get just a small glimpse into Paul's ministry. He is traveling through Thessalonica. Verse 1 says, Then they traveled through Amphipolis and Apollonia and came to Thessalonica, where there was a Jewish synagogue. As usual, Paul went to the synagogue, and on the Sabbath days reasoned with them from the Scriptures, explaining and showing that the Messiah had to suffer and rise from the dead. This Jesus I am proclaiming to you is the Messiah. Let me pause there. And so the idea is that Paul didn't just go willy-nilly into any old random place. He went to strategic, growing cities. And then when he got there, he intentionally went to the synagogue where there were Jewish background people who could become Jewish background believers. They were the first ones that he would preach the gospel to in hopes that they would believe. And often some of them would, but then many of them would reject him, and he would end up going on into the rest of the city and preaching the gospel among the Gentiles. So what you see in there is Paul's vision to go where Christ has not been named and to preach him, and yet the way that he works that out is through this strategy of going first to the synagogues of these large cities. We could also get into his strategy of being a marketplace or bivocational worker, building tents, but that'll be for another time. Let me go back to an example that we used in the vision video for element 3. We said one of the churches made their vision statement, 12 teams in 12 cities by 2025. Well, the question would be, how are they going to accomplish that? And so building a strategy would work through not just a 10-word statement, but a very detailed document, maybe multiple pages, of how exactly they were going to take step by step to develop missionaries and then develop them into teams and then to select particular cities in which to send them, and to do all of this according to a timeline in such a way that it would be accomplished by 2025. Now, all that would be obviously very idealistic and probably wouldn't work out perfectly, but at least they have a strategy that will guide them through it step by step. Another example that we gave was we want to send our first missionary as a church by 2025. Well, what are the processes and systems that you need to put in place? Have you identified someone yet? Have you assessed them yet? Have you developed them yet? A strategy would have all those things included, along with what it would take to pull those off and a time frame for when you would like to see those pulled off. Another example was we would like to plant a church among deaf peoples that plants a church among deaf peoples. Okay, fantastic vision, but how are you going to actually carry that out? Do you have relationships with deaf peoples already in your context? Leaders that you can lean into? Is there an existing deaf church that you can go to and learn from? What are the steps that you're going to need to take in order to work that out? Do you know what it's like to plant a church? What organization maybe do you need to come alongside you to help you understand the steps in planting a church, and then quantify that according to a timeline? So let's continue on in the definition. Rather than being spread thin, the sending church becomes invested in a specific strategy that guides the stewardship of financial resources and the sending efforts. And so again, this is that idea of shooting a shotgun versus shooting a rifle. The church can spread itself thin in missions by building their strategy out to kind of do everything. And this shoots like a shotgun with shrapnel going everywhere and making a very shallow impact. Instead, we would say be very specific in your strategy so that it will achieve your vision. It makes a maybe more narrow impact, but then deeper impact among the particular people and places in which you have envisioned your ministry. And so that means you are channeling your resources in that particular direction instead of saying, yes, we'll give money to this and that and all over the place. That means you're channeling your energy, your visioning among the congregation about what your church is aimed to do. It's saying no to good things so that you can say yes to the best things. And this is hard when it comes to missions because our heart is compelled for lost people to come to know Christ. But we have to be able to say no to many of those good things in order for us to be faithful to what specifically God has called us to do to make a deep and multiplying impact on the world. And so one of the ways that I've seen a church work this out in terms of tiers is there are maybe people in places that we own, people in places with whom we partner, and people in places in which we bless. And what they mean by that is kind of a tier system. So own, that is, we're all in when it comes to finances and communication and personnel. We're all in among those peoples and places. Partner would be, these are places where we're not all in, but we are working alongside them in this particular ministry. And then bless would be where you say, we love what you're doing, praise the Lord for it, we're going to pray for you and bless you to do that, but we're not going to have any ongoing commitment as a church to that ministry. It may be a helpful way to think through how you can say no to good things and yes to the best things. This means also intentional budgeting. Now, a lot of times churches function in terms of missions dollars by having a missions committee who determines where that money goes. But what we would say is go before the missions committee decides those things and invest in them with the convictions and vision and strategy that you are aiming toward so that they can catch it. And then when they make decisions on the budget, on missions dollars, they're deciding them according to what you've envisioned to aim for as a local church. I would also encourage you in this process to put down practical measures of how effective you are being in fulfilling the strategy. We need to have this happen by this time next year. Well, mark that down so that you can hold yourself accountable to it and then reassess if you miss that mark next year. So those are some of the things that go into building a strategy. It's a very important part of being a sending church. So I'll end with this. May the sending God bless you as you seek to build a strategy in your sending church.